So on today's Eric Mortimer Associates video, I'm going to be speaking with Sarah Johnston, fellow MaxWell Realtor and President-Elect of the Calgary Real Estate market. We're going to be talking about how politics and policy are affecting the Calgary real estate market and your investments. So you travel back and forth across the country and into the States, and you just came back from the States. And what's happening down there?
So I was actually just in Boston. So every year, the National Association of Realtors has an annual event. So it's called NAR Annual. And they do that the first weekend of every November every year. And I'm lucky enough to be able to go and kind of meet and greet fellow agents from across North America. There's about 20,000 agents that all gather together. So it's a really interesting experience. So there's a whole bunch of Canadians there also, and of course spread out all across Canada. And then a lot of agents from the States. You know, they're all from different states. Markets are high, markets are low, markets are varied. But on the whole, my interpretation was that they're doing okay. You know, their unemployment levels are pretty low right now. They're keeping up with the cost of inflation. And while some markets might not be doing as well, I didn't know or notice anywhere that was struggling quite as much as we were.
Right. Well, it's good to know that it's not that soft there yet. I always say if the sneeze in the States, we catch a cold. So the near future probably isn't that bad in our effect from what's coming up from the States.
Absolutely not. I wouldn't be too worried about the States and what's going on there just now. And of course, we've just had another election down there. So they're going to balance things out a little bit more. I'm more concerned about what's going on in Canada. So it's really kind of the Canadian politics that are getting in the way, I'd say, of what's going on in their market. Right. And of course, I was in Ottawa a month ago with the Political Action Standing Committee for the Calgary Real Estate Board. And they didn't seem to think that housing was a big deal right now and not anything that they really wanted to concentrate on. In fact, it was my impression that they wanted to increase some of the legislative changes coming up, meaning making it a little bit more difficult for people to purchase homes. Right. There's a concern about Canadians' debt loads and those levels. You know, our interest rates are slowly increasing as we've just had another kind of point increase, and we expect to see more in the coming year. So they're expecting that the next few announcements will be for increases, and of course that happens every 2 or 3 months.
And more potential regulations to try and slow down Vancouver and Toronto even more.
Well, exactly. I mean, what they pulled out last January didn't necessarily slow down those markets. Vancouver more so than Toronto. Toronto kind of went through a bump, and yes, things are slowing down there. But what's really happening is that it's essentially collapsing housing industries in everywhere that isn't a major city. So we're seeing huge decreases in Alberta, in Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and Newfoundland. Our level of sales haven't been this low since the late 1990s, and yet our population has increased by 40%. That tells you something.
And those effects ripple out into other industries as well, right?
Absolutely. So the housing industry really is between $30 and $40 billion per year. And I'm not just talking about the buy and sell of properties and what agents are making across the country. It's really about what other industries actually make a living off of housing and out of housing moving. So we're talking about building and construction and the trades. We're talking about mortgage brokers and lenders. And all of that has to do with the buying and selling of homes. So there's a huge industry that is based on houses trading hands. And the inability to do that or to slow it down to a certain extent can have a crippling effect. And I think that we're not completely aware, even as agents, of what that effect is. But it's far-reaching, for sure.
I think a lot of people are feeling it right now. The ripples go through it. Seeing a lot of restaurants that are closed, a lot of businesses that are closed, that kind of thing.
Absolutely. You know, go downtown and walk through the plus 15. And it's kind of depressing.
So the question that everybody wants to know, you're down in the States. What did Mark Wahlberg have to say?
Oh my God, right? It was inspiring actually to listen to him. We've heard about his past indiscretions. He was a bad apple. He did some terrible, terrible things. But people really like a coming of age good news story. And he's turned his life around, kind of done a 180. And you don't fall on the top of the mountain. He works his butt off. So he goes to bed at 6:30 at night. He gets up at 2:30 in the morning. And while for real estate in our industry, that's not realistic. I mean, getting up at 9:30, going to bed at 9:30 and then getting up at 5:30 in the morning is very, very doable.
Yep.
And he works hard. He reaches out to the top of the top in industries. He's diversified his portfolio. He's heavily involved in commercial real estate. He has a car dealership. He has restaurants, and he's always looking to improve not only himself, but what his interests are. And he's motivated, ridiculously motivated. His schedule is one thing, but he gets up that early so he can go to the gym so that he can get back to people that he needs to, sending emails out. And he's really kind of made a worldwide franchise based off of him and his name. And he works hard to get there. He doesn't take no for an answer. He calls up the head of corporations and companies on his own and says, "Hey, I'm Mark Wahlberg." And half the time they do slam down the phone saying, "No, you're not." And he says, "Yes, I am." And it was inspiring to listen to. And if people don't take him seriously, he will show up at their front door. And he'll say, knock, knock, knock. I have these questions. I think we can do this together. I want to sit down and pick your brain. And so he's always looking to get the next leg up. And he works hard to get there. So it's not just the Lux life living in Beverly Hills. He's working incredibly hard. And so it was really interesting to hear him speak like that. And to be like, wow, things aren't even easy at that point. He is continuously working to get better. And that was really interesting to hear.
And that's all advice that we can use no matter what industry we're in Calgary right now.
Absolutely. Work your butt off. Doesn't matter what's going on in the market out there. It's really the market that's up there in your head that's going to dictate where you are. Market's not fantastic, but you can still do very well.
So that's some great advice. Thanks, Sarah, for joining us today.
You're very welcome.
Till next time, I'm Eric Mortimer, helping you solve your problems and realize your dreams.